Welcome to the BBC News at 6. Two more MPs are quitting Parliament following revelations about their expenses. The Conservative, Julie Kirkbride, has finally bowed to the pressure after thousands of her constituents signed a petition calling for her to go. And Labour's Margaret Moran, who'd already agreed to repay more than £20,000, said she'd made the decision to step down at the next election with great sadness. James Landau reports.
Two women, divided by party, united by fate. Margaret Moran and Julie Kirkbride fought hard to save their careers, but in the end the pressure was too great, announcing within minutes of each other that the game was up. Even as late as this morning, despite yet more negative headlines, Ms Kirkbride was on the airwaves defending her position.
Up until now, I think I had a very good reputation in Bromsgrove for being a hard-working constituency MP who...
But the charge sheet against her continued to grow. Last year, she began claiming an extra £250 a month to pay for a new bedroom in her constituency flat, so her brother, living rent-free, didn't have to share a room with her son. She knew too that her husband, Andrew Mackay, had been claiming more than £1,000 a month for a second home, which was actually their main home in London. And she was also criticised for employing her sister as a part-time secretary, even though she lives more than 100 miles away from her Bromsgrove constituency. Miss Kirkbride had planned to return to Bromsgrove this morning, but she called Mr Cameron to say she could take no more. In a resignation letter, she said she understood the public anger, but insisted she'd been subject to unbearable pressure from what she called a barrage of distorted press stories. In reply, Mr Cameron said Miss Kirkbride had fully answered the charges against her, hinted at a return to politics, but understood why she was going.
Now, in the case of Julie Kirkbride, it is very much her decision to stand down. She feels under huge pressure. She's explained a lot about her own expense claims, and I very much respect the decision that she's taken.
The people of Bromsgrove were less forgiving.
She shouldn't even be given the option of resigning. She should be sacked.
Well, what she's done is wrong, I know, but every MP's done the same, so I'd be prepared to give her another chance.
They know that they're playing the system, and it's wrong.
In the end, for both Miss Kirkbride and Margaret Moran, the scale of local anger and national media pressure was just too great. Margaret Moran had faced one central charge, namely that she'd claimed £22,500 to pay for treating dry rot at her partner's home in Southampton, a good 100 miles from her constituency. Ms Moran's paid the money back, but today she insisted she'd done nothing wrong. She was going because the understandable public anger was damaging her family and her health. In Luton, sympathy for the invisible Ms Moran was not thick on the ground.
She knows she did wrong, and that's the only thing she make it right is saying she's not going to stand no more.
Reaction.
That's brilliant news.
It's a shame, really, because she has done a lot for Luton in the last few years.
There was little defence from Labour colleagues.
However much hard work you've done in your constituency and however able an MP you've been in the House of Commons, it's absolutely basic that not only do you work within the spirit of the rules, letter of the rules, but within the spirit of the rules.
Julie Kirkbride and Margaret Moran entered Parliament together 12 years ago, and together they'll leave it, victims of their expense claims and the outcry that followed. James Landau, BBC News, Westminster.
So far, 10 MPs have said they'll step down at the next election following revelations about their expenses. Today, the Liberal Democrat leader, Nick Clegg, said he thought constituents should have the right to sack MPs. Public pressure has proved effective so far, but how far are the parties prepared to go to end this crisis? Gary O'Donoghue reports.
3 weeks into this expenses saga, and the numbers being forced out keep on growing. So gone are 7 Tory MPs. 2 Labour MPs are on their way out, and the Commons Speaker, Michael Martin, will exit next month. Still hanging on in there are the former Minister Elliot Morley, Labour MPs Ian Gibson and David Chater, and after allegations today, the Tory MP Sir John Butterfill. Not everyone, though, is satisfied with MPs simply saying they'll go at the next election.
Why do people need to wait until the general election to have their say? Surely, if it is shown, if it's proved that an MP has done something seriously wrong, then people in their constituencies should have the right to sack them and have their say now.
Thank you very much. The problem for all politicians is that this crisis over expenses has induced such anger within the public that they find themselves stuck in the eye of the storm. They know the progress of the story lies with others, so the parties simply don't know how or when it's going to end. Some steps, of course, are already being taken. The Tories are putting all their MPs through a scrutiny panel. That process is almost finished, while Labour is only examining the expenses of those MPs who've been called into question. And the Commons is also planning to go through everyone's receipts for the past 5 years.
Come on, let's have your signatures, please.
Meanwhile, the public have been exercising their own form of scrutiny, like this petition against Julie Kirkbride. And that public meeting a week ago, which saw her husband face the people and pay the price.
These resignations are the right thing to do. The guilty MPs have shown they're not fit for public office, and the public have held them to account and said, hang on a minute, we pay your wages, every penny of your expenses comes out of our pockets, and we demand that you step down and give us a chance to vote for someone that we can be proud of.
No one believes this round of departures and resignations is over yet. Many MPs are still to face their constituents. It's a nervous time for them all. Gary O'Donoghue, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's talk now to James Landale at Westminster. We're into double figures now, the number of MPs who are quitting. Are we expecting very many more to go?
Yeah, no, I think so. There will be a lot more to come for several reasons. One is the Daily Telegraph has still not yet finished all its revelations. They've still got a chunk of MPs to go. We don't know what's coming, but the likelihood is that I'm sure some of the MPs will be named will go. Secondly, the party disciplinary process, these new panels or star chambers that have been set up, they are just beginning their work of going through all the details. I'd be amazed and astounded if they give all their MPs a clean bill of health. And there are also those sort of quiet MPs who have maybe escaped the national media spotlight, who are getting it in the neck from their local media, who might think, you know, in the days and weeks ahead, actually, I can't face this for another year before a general election. I'm just going to give it up and stand down. And there are also those MPs who perhaps were thinking of standing down for other reasons, for whom the expenses row might at least be a factor within their calculations. One such example is Christopher Fraser, the Conservative MP for Norfolk South West, who was named by the Daily Telegraph for claiming £1,800 to buy over 200 trees. He's announced today that he will not be seeking re-election, not, he says, because of the expenses row, but simply because his wife has ill health and he wants to spend more time looking after her.
James Landale in Westminster, thank you very much. Almost 2 years after 5 British men were kidnapped in Iraq, their families have spoken of their continuing